I fell off an embankment at Red Rocks, Colorado amphitheater, about 1.5 stories. And there was nothing but a pile of rocks below me, and I fell straight back, tripping over a small wall that was there and fell on my head. And I fell off an embankment at Red Rocks, Colorado amphitheater, about 1.5 stories. And there was nothing but a pile of rocks below me, and I fell straight back, tripping over a small wall that was there and fell on my head. So I sustained a fractured skull. My brain bounced, so there was a lot of bleeding in my brain. A lot of brain trauma, a lot of damage to my brain, which I wouldn't find out until later. I fractured my back in several places. I have three compressed discs, which makes me 3 inches shorter than I used to be. Used to be 5'7", so I don't like that part of it. But also, the way I fell, this whole side of me was dislocated, and my friend said that I was like folded in half, like a jelly sandwich. So I had a lot of injuries up and down my body besides just inside my head. And when I was in a coma for a couple weeks in the hospital, and then when I came to an excruciating amount of pain, head pain especially, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even bring a phone up to my head to call my parents and let them know what had happened. I was on vacation. They didn't even know that I was in Colorado. And when I talked, people would look at me like a dog looks at you, like this, like, what are you saying? Because the words would come out like I thought I was saying something and it didn't make sense. And then when other people talked to me, it was like the words came out of their mouth and scattered in the air, and I couldn't put them together in a sentence. I couldn't even tell you that's a shoe, that's a ceiling, this is a ring. I couldn't pick the words out to put a sentence together. And with all the brain damage, and all the testing that I had, they found me to be borderline retarded. So after extensive testing, all these doctors, different orthopedic and neurologists and different kind of doctors, said that I would never be independent again, that I would always have to live with someone under care, that I would always have to be looked after, that I couldn't really be alone. And and they said if I was ever going to be able to work, it would only be something like sorting baskets or silverware under supervision. Under supervision. So it was not very, there wasn't much of a prospect for me as far as I could see. And they were just trying to teach me in the hospital basic stuff, like teaching me how to shave my legs and take care of myself, because I couldn't even put a sequence of things together, like to get in the shower or any of that. I couldn't put it together to do it. So for a long time I had to put it on notes to get in the shower and go, okay, wash your hair, okay, wash your ears, wash your face. And it was all very basic things that I had to learn all over again. And I was in excruciating pain. I vomited almost every day because I had so much pain, and just the pounding in my head. I just could hardly bear it. It was so intolerable. And I couldn't stand up. I couldn't sit up. They did have to eventually teach me how to sit up. And in order to stand up, they'd put me on this slant board, and they'd put a pressure cuff on me, and they would slowly wheel it up. And I always passed out. So it took a long, long time, even before my body would allow me to stand up. And as far as walking, they said, you might not even ever walk. Well, I was in the hospital at least a month. I'm not really sure. No contact with my family or anything. And I didn't like being in the hospital. I didn't like being that dependent. I just plain didn't like it. I know no one else does either, but I just wanted to leave. And I said, I want to leave. And they said, you're not even close to being ready to get out of here and do anything on your own. And I just said, I'm leaving anyway. And so they made me sign a release form because I really wasn't ready, and that, you know, that could have been on them. So anyway, so I left the hospital, and I went and stayed with a friend of mine who I had come to visit in the first place, Colorado. This was like a vacation. And so I stayed with that friend for another month. I couldn't hold utensils in my hand. I couldn't eat myself because I couldn't hold anything together. I couldn't coordinate my fingers or my hands together. And I was in so much pain that I couldn't take a shower or anything because I wore a back brace. It went from my chest to my pelvic bone, and then it cinched in around me. So that kind of held me up so that the pain wasn't so excruciating. But every time I took it off and tried to take a shower, I'd pass out. And then, of course, I'd bump my head again on the tile or the fixtures because I couldn't stay standing. But I could barely walk. I could barely walk. So I took a bus downtown. I lived in Long Beach, California. Took a bus downtown. I couldn't drive, and went to the public assistance office. I think it was, back then it was called welfare office. It was for people who I thought needed a little boost to get back into their life again. That's what I thought it was. So I went there, and I took the bus every day. I went there for a whole year, every day, almost like a job. I would go with my peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a novel. I would be the first, at least fifth person in line when they opened it up. For some reason, I was always the last one that they took. And the security guy was really nice, and he would walk me out to the bus stop because it was already dark, so I could get a bus. It wasn't a nice part of town in the first place. So I just, every time they would turn me down, and it was always for something different. And there were a lot of people there that they would tell me what to put on the papers. This is how you get public, this is how you get welfare. But it was all a lie. They were lies. And I wasn't going to lie in order to get it, so I didn't. And in the end, they told me that I couldn't get it because I couldn't work. Why didn't they tell me that the very first day? They didn't tell me anything. So someone suggested disability, so I went to the disability office. I didn't know about these things. So I went to the disability office, and the guy sat at his desk, and he was just writing notes and stuff, and he didn't even talk to me, didn't ask me to touch my nose. They always ask you to touch your nose, touch your toes, do something to see if you're coordinated enough to do any of that. He didn't do anything. He just denied my disability. Didn't do a thing. So I thought, okay, my last ditch effort is unemployment, right? I've been paying into unemployment all of my life. So I went to the unemployment office, and when he turned me down, he said, if you can't work, you can't get unemployment. I didn't know that was how that worked, and I knew this was my last chance, and I started crying, and then sobbing uncontrollably, because I knew this was my last chance of getting some help, and I didn't have help from my family or anybody. They had to escort me out of the building because I was making such a spectacle of myself, and they just couldn't have it. They just couldn't have it. Ma'am, you can't do that. Can't cry, can't be hopeless. So anyway, so I had met a couple guys from Texas in the public assistance office. Very nice guy. They had moved here and were trying to make a new life for themselves, and they were getting public assistance and food and all this stuff. They were getting money, and I couldn't. And so I asked them to come live with me. I didn't know them except for from the office, and I knew God's hand of protection was on me because neither one of them touched me. Neither one of them stole anything. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, so I don't know how they figured out I had a couch bed or whatever, so wherever they slept, it was not in my room. But they were so polite and respectful. They would go by my bedroom, excuse me, ma'am, and I'm like, okay, and it was really nice. They had food, they could get food. So they would bring food in, they would cook the food, they would do the dishes, they would take out the trash, they would do the laundry, they did everything. I felt really cared for, and so that worked. I'm glad that I asked them. I feel in a lot of ways like they were my little angels. And we still were friends after they moved on, because eventually they got their own homes, they got jobs, and they just went on with their own lives. Well, soon after coming home, I started to have these episodes, and I really didn't know what they were. So when I first started having these incidences or episodes, whatever you want to call them, where I would black out and I wouldn't know quite what happened, but I felt really weak after, kind of like what happened. So I wasn't really sure what was going on, but I went to the doctor and they did a bunch more tests. I had a neurological doctor because of all the brain damage and everything that had happened. And anyway, so it came out from the test that it was called status epilepticus, and it's a non-convulsive seizure. And so I was starting to take meds for that, as well as taking Demerol, which is not really prescribed much anymore, but it's a very strong narcotic. So I was taking seizure medications, and I was taking a lot of pain meds, and they gave me some special meds just for the headaches, because they were like migraines back then, and I still get them sometime. I've literally had a headache for 35 years, every single day. So the doctors told me, because of the seizures, that I couldn't drive, and they were supposed to contact DMV and take away my driver's license. But for whatever reason, they didn't. And luckily, they didn't. I guess it's lucky. I lived alone. I needed to drive. I needed to go to the store. I needed to do some things. And so I drove anyway. Well, one day, I found myself sitting at a red light, and all these cars all around me were honking. And there was a car right in front of me, and I thought I'd hit it because I just blacked out. Obviously, I had a seizure. And all of a sudden, he just started moving and moved on through the intersection and went on his way, so I hadn't hit him. But it was quite scary to think that, I could have hurt somebody or hurt myself or something. But another part of that was when I drove somewhere, things didn't connect in my brain. So I didn't know where I was. I had been driving past somewhere, my own apartment, and nothing looked familiar. So I kept driving around until something looked familiar. Eventually something looked familiar. Sometimes I'd pull over to the road and just sob, and sometimes I'm like, okay, get a grip, just keep driving, you're gonna find it eventually. And so I usually did. And it's not, I still have that problem sometimes. However, we have GPS now. So I pretty much can find my way around, but I still have that disconnect where things don't look familiar. And I'm a little calmer now about the whole thing, because I know I'm going to finally, you kind of accept some of the things that are part of your life, and you just go with that. So I was pushing myself every day. I'm a very stubborn person, as you could probably tell from some of the things that I have already told you, that I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to prove everything wrong that they had told me, that I was borderline retarded, and I might not be able to walk. I'd always have to live with someone. I'm just like, I don't think so. And so I lived on a second story, and I'd walk along the balcony up and back because I could hang onto the railing. So up and back until I got strong enough. And finally I made it down the stairs. It was easy enough to go down the stairs, harder to come up, but I just kept getting stronger, kept pushing myself more. And I was 3 blocks from the beach. And I thought, okay, that's my goal. I'm gonna get down to that beach. Because I had gone down to the beach, that was my exercise. I went down there roller skating every day. So I finally got down to the beach, and I laid down on the sand, but I couldn't get up. So I had to ask someone to help me up, and it continued for a long time. I would go every day down to the beach and just lay down on the beach because I was exhausted, and I would lay there for hours because I was so exhausted at just getting that 3 blocks to the beach. So I'd get some I would get some help. I made a good friend, actually. We're still friends 30-some years later. He kept coming by the same time I was there and helping me up. So that worked out okay in that instance. But I was getting very discouraged because I've always been a really strong, physically strong and robust person, and I thought I would be getting better. I thought I would be recovering more, that I'd be stronger, that I just thought it would be different. I just thought recovery was a lot quicker, and it just wasn't. It just wasn't happening, and I was pretty much at an all-time high in the department of discouragement. I was not happy with my life. I couldn't do my Mary Kay. I couldn't. I could barely just get through a day, basically. So I was pretty discouraged, and I was taking the pain meds, but I was still having breakthrough seizures, and the pain only made it tolerable to live. It never removes your pain. Nothing removes your pain, and so I was feeling pretty discouraged. So one day, I sat on my bed with all my big shoebox. I had a shoebox of pills, and I thought, with all those pills, surely I could take them all, and I would just not wake up again. And I was sitting there just thinking how miserable my life was. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a purpose. I couldn't even take care of myself, and I had nobody to help me. My friends had come and gone already. They'd come and they brought their food, and they brought me sweats so I could get dressed and all of that. And it just wasn't the life that I had envisioned for myself. I was going to be a chiropractor, dang it. I was going to have a life and a career and all these things. And as I sat there, I also had the phone book with the yellow pages, and I had it open to a suicide hotline on one side of me, and on the other side I had my phone book open, my address book with my pastor's phone number. And I thought maybe I should call somebody to talk me out of taking my life. To me, it was just such a useless life that's just what I wanted to do. But before I could make a decision either way, I had this incredible presence of God, like a cloud, just come around me. And then it was like he was hugging me from the inside out. He just enveloped me, and he said, I have a plan and purpose for you. I have my plan and purpose. You're going to be okay. I can't say I believed him, even though I know it was God. I just kind of felt his comfort, that hug of comfort from him, and I just fell into a deep sleep, probably some of the best sleep that I've had for a long time. And when I woke up, I really didn't feel any better, because things weren't better, things were the same. But there was something different. I felt different in some little way that I can't explain. When you have a seizure, just to give you an example, you feel very wrung out, but it's like you overload your fuse box. It's an electrical current that goes through your body and just kind of scatters. And it can cause brain damage, permanent brain damage. And any part of the brain that it does damage means whatever that was controlling can no longer work. So there was always the possibility that I could have brain damage, but the meds themselves were not good for your organs, for your teeth, for your gums. That wasn't good either. So it was very debilitating to have seizures, and I had them quite frequently, no matter what. And I was told by my doctor not to do anything risky, because he knew I had been a skydiver, I had backpacked by myself, I had done all these things. I was a commercial fisherman for 5 years in south end of Kodiak Island with nothing else around. So he's like, okay, don't do anything but your normal life, cook, be a normal person. And so I didn't listen. I wanted my life back. I wanted to go skating again. I wanted to do my Mary Kay. I wanted to work. I wanted to be a productive person in society, and I wasn't, and that wasn't acceptable to me. And so I got on my skates. I drove down to the Strand where at the beach, and I got on my roller skates and I went skating very slow. I didn't have a headset on. I wasn't singing, dancing, or anything. I just slowly scooting along so that I wouldn't fall, because it would have been very devastating if I fell again. So this was the day I met my future husband. I was skating and I went by the marina, and he goes, hey, where'd you get those skates? I said, you don't want these. You want the inline skates. They're faster and all that. He goes, no, I want those kinds of skates. And so this was the ultimate pickup line, because then he asked me down to his boat. He had a sailboat there, 34-foot Catalina sailboat, and he invited me down to his boat. And we had a glass of wine. We sat down there and we talked, and I found out that he wanted to go cruising around the world in a sailboat. Ever since I was young, I read books about pirates and the first woman who sailed around the world, the first boy who sailed around the world, and I wanted to go around the world too. So I thought, this is a kinship. This is something. And so we started seeing each other, and we sailed all over the place. We sailed up and down the California coast, all around the Channel Islands and Catalina all the time, and even down to Mexico. So we were having a pretty good time, and I was making a go of it. I still had seizures and I still had a lot of pain, but sometimes when you have joy in your life or happiness, kind of overrides the pain, and it makes it a little bit more livable. So I was pretty happy. Anyway, my seizures, nothing was under control at the time, but for some reason, it had nothing to do with the seizures or the pain. I was starting to feel not right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I didn't feel good. There's something in me that didn't feel good, made me very tired, and just wanting to rest. So I went to the doctor, received some tests, and I found out I had cancer. I thought, isn't what I'm going through enough? Lord, isn't this enough, what I'm already going through? I don't think I can take any more weight on my shoulders. I can't deal with this big C word, this big cancer thing. And my seizures started to get worse. We would be up in the mountains, and I would have a seizure, and then I would have another seizure, and I would just keep having seizures over and over. And it was, talk about debilitating. The things, I didn't even know it for a long time how dangerous it was, what I was going through, because I was so in a cloud of confusion. I never knew what I was doing. I could never complete any task. But uncontrolled seizures can change your heart rhythm. It can give you arrhythmia. It can also just stop your heart. But because it works, seizures work on muscles, it also works on the other muscles, and that's why I would feel so weak whenever I had a seizure, because it put toxins of some sort into your muscles. Those toxins can get into your kidneys and cause kidney failure. And of course, the problem that I had the most is called status epilepticus, and it can cause you to quit breathing, and of course then it starves your brain and you could die. It could cause death ultimately. So all those things were very dangerous things. And so we had many times where my husband had to call paramedics, and we had chosen a cabin very close to the fire station just for this reason. In case anything happened, they could be there within minutes, and they were. So the paramedics were there quite often, and they had to take me down the hill, which is about 30 minutes, to a hospital. We had a hospital up on the mountain, but it was not equipped for something like seizures. And so many times I had to go down the hospital, and they had to resuscitate me because I would quit breathing. And one such time they had to pull over, and I think it was because there wasn't enough of them, so the guy who was driving, he pulled over and resuscitated me. Well, I think this was the particular time that I had an out-of-body experience. And I feel like I was in heaven, but I was still tied by a thin thread. I wasn't quite there. I still felt tied to the earth. But I knew it was heaven, because anything that you see, anything that you've seen in this beautiful world was so much more sharp, clear, bright, beautiful, colorful. It was amazing. And it was, I don't think I was there for a long time, but I got that just impression of how beautiful heaven is. But that wasn't the most beautiful thing. It was all the love that I had in my heart. It wasn't this body, because I feel like all the love that we have cannot be contained in this human body. It was a heavenly body, I know, because the love expanded out. I felt like it going out. And the whole air that I was breathing was love, was like love. And my love just intertwined with all this love like a tapestry. Like I was part of that love. I was love. And that was so amazing. And Joy felt the same way. I felt so joyful and so just so much joy and so much love. But music was also part of it. I know our Bible says that there's going to be singing in heaven, and we're going to be praising God. But the music, again, it was like I was the music. Kind of like if you've ever, those big Bose speakers we used to have, that you crank up the treble and the bass, and you lay on the floor, and the music comes through you like a vibration, like you are the music. That's what it felt like. I was the love and the joy and the music. And it was a perfect state. My body, of course, wasn't in pain. I just felt a perfect state of homeostasis. It was like this purple light that was so comforting. It was a very comforting feeling. And I had read since on other people's out-of-body experiences, and they say they see the face of Christ, or they see a tunnel with a light at the end of the tunnel. And I didn't see his face, but I felt his presence. I knew he was there. It was like getting that hug before when I wanted to do away with my life. And he asked me, he just straight out asked me, did I want to stay there with him, or did I want to go back to Earth? And I didn't even think about it. I didn't rationalize. I had a pretty nice life. I lived aboard a boat with my son and my husband. Someday we were going to go cruising, and it was a nice life. But that didn't even cross my mind. I just saw these big black letters, big block letters, and it just said life. And I went, I choose life. And I came back and I opened my eyes, and this nurse was looking down at me, and he goes, welcome back. I thought we'd lost you. So I was back. And I had been, somewhere in here, I had been seeing a head trauma specialist. He was a brain surgeon. And so we had been seeing him, and we were making plans, because he had already tried everything. We'd tried every medication there was on the market. So I was down to taking 3 types of meds 3 times a day. And there were diets, and there were other things, and you could get a therapy dog. And so there was things like that. But he was to the point where he didn't think that anything was going to help me with my breakthrough seizures. So he said, this is what I propose. Put you in the hospital, and we're going to put electrodes all over your brain. And we're going to allow a seizure or induce a seizure. And we're going to see where the problem is in your brain, the place where the seizures were coming from. And then they would remove that part of the brain. And I'm like, okay. And we had this girl at church, and she had the same kind of seizure. She had complex partial seizures. And she had to wear a helmet, and she still had breakthrough seizures, and she still had to live with her parents. But I didn't care. I didn't feel like I had a life. I couldn't drive. I couldn't go anywhere. I was embarrassed to have a seizure around other people who wouldn't understand, just think I was, I don't know, space cadet. And so I'm like, yeah, okay. My husband's saying, I know what I have. Can't we just keep it this way? And I'm like, I don't think so. So we called my mom. She lived in Juneau, and we were going to have her come down and watch my son while I went into the hospital. And then she had a stroke. So we were kind of in a waiting pattern for her to get better and see if she could come down or if someone else was going to have to do this. But I forgot what I was saying. I just said, okay, I want to do it. I want to do it. And so that was ultimately the plan. Well, we were trying to go to church. We were going to church as much as possible. We went to this huge mega church, and in front was a big place for prayer, and in the back was even a bigger place for people like me who needed to walk around, sit down, move around, and not disrupt the body. So I never sat in the body, I always sat in the back. Well, one day this woman came up to me, and I knew who she was. She'd prayed for me before and everything. She goes, she was almost on the verge of tears. She was very emotional. She said, I think I'm supposed to pray for you. And I'm like, I'm thinking I should pray for her. I said, can I pray for you? She goes, no, God is distinctly telling me that I'm supposed to pray for you. And so I said, okay. So we went up front, and I closed my eyes, and she put her hand on my shoulder and started praying for me. And all of a sudden, I felt all these other hands on my back and shoulders, and people started praying for me. And then they started, some of them were speaking in tongues. And it was like all those prayers and speaking in tongues kind of gave this vibration, almost like I felt when I was in heaven in that near-death experience. It was just this going through me. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was going to have a seizure. I'm like, oh, great. So you can feel it coming on. You can feel it coming on. You have an aura that you're going to have a seizure, but then you just black out, and you don't know you had a seizure until you come out of it, and then you need to sit down or lay down or whatever. But I felt it. It's like an electrical current. It is an electrical current, but that's what it feels like. And it came through my head, came all the way through my body, hit the floor, and then it started. I was completely conscious through this whole thing, came back up, and it came out of my head. And I fell down onto my knees, and everybody just kind of followed me there and kept praying for me. And all of a sudden, I felt it again. I felt it come through my head again, this electrical current, boom, all the way down, hit my feet, came back out, and came out my head. Bam, flat out on the floor this time, flat out on the floor. And I opened my eyes, and everyone's looking down at me. And I looked over, and the choir was just getting out. They had practiced while I was being prayed for, and that's about an hour. They practiced for an hour. So these people had prayed for me for at least an hour. That to me, that's pretty special. That's some people who believe in prayer. Well, I went home that day, and I thought, I wonder what this is all about. And I thought, I'm healed. I have to be healed. What was all that for? It was out of the ordinary. And so I went home, and I didn't take my meds that night. And then the same thing, the next morning, usually I would have a seizure because your body's just not on guard, and it's typical to have a seizure early in the morning. And so I didn't have any seizures, so I didn't take my meds. And then at noon, I didn't take my meds, and at dinner, I didn't take my meds. I didn't have one seizure that day, which was unusual in itself. So I just figured I'm going to go a little bit longer and see what happens. I went 3 weeks before I thought about getting back with the head trauma specialist and letting him know, because we had plans. We were just waiting for someone to look out after my son. And so I went and told him what happened, that I got prayed for at church, and I said, I think I'm a miracle. I think I'm healed. And he goes, well, I've never had that happen to me before. And I said, well, it's never happened to me before, but I'm going to take it. I'm going to take this miracle. And he found out that I quit taking my meds. He freaked out, because if you quit taking them, you can have seizures. I'm like, really? I've been having breakthrough seizures constantly. He goes, okay, just keep the meds for a while, and if you have a seizure, immediately come in. Don't even make an appointment, just come right in. So I said, okay. And that's been over 25 years ago, and I haven't had one single seizure. So I felt like, okay, I can enter back into the land of the living. And I